and lead it in terms of Arab League. He failed. Now he's coming to Africa. But so there's that hatred. But I think that in terms of the West, there are two things. Again, they hate the man so much. He needs to go. But this is an oil country. We can't run away from that.
That's what I was going to ask you about, Nabila. I mean, so what would you say, who are the rebels exactly, and what are the West interests? And we talked about sinister kind of interviews, but what would you do? I mean, would you just let this play out? Because it did look, did it not, up to 48 hours ago, that Gaddafi, what he said about what he was going to do in Benghazi was so chilling, wasn't it?
Very
I
much
think
so.
he's got a gun, that...
Absolutely. That sounded like major act of retaliation, completely, and I agree with that. But I think we should take him literally now. He's calling for a UN fact-finding mission to come to Libya to find out exactly if he's killing civilians. Well, let's do that. Let's go and send observers on the ground. Let's go and find who is killing who. Let's not forget that he's dealing with an armed, rebellion. So we heard that a plane has been brought down a few hours ago. Well, it turned out it's not a plane, a Gaddafi plane. It's a rebel plane. So we're not sure. We're hearing that there is military action going on still now, but we don't know who's.
I think the only problem is
behind it
that
all.
Gaddafi should not be given, in a certain way. I can understand what you're talking about in terms of, we need to do the right thing. He's calling for this and that. That must not overshadow the fact that this guy is bad to his people. He's a great dictator, and
He's also a great
in a
poker
certain
player.
way. I will not cry any tears if anybody bombs him or if he has to go. He should go.
No, but I mean, Bill is making a point that he might not be bombing him. He might be bombing other people. Because
That is why perhaps
I think we all agree.
Personally, I would say the best way out of this is tomorrow Gaddafi wakes up and he says to the world, I want to negotiate my way out.
But you've met him. That doesn't seem like
so. That is his
he wants to hang on. He will play one side off against the
Well,
other.
he's very comfortable in the role that we put him in. The hard man pariah who's defying the West.
He's comfortable in that.
And we've placed him straight back in this position.
So that is a problem, isn't it? Because in the end, he is there, and the French forces, the American forces, and the British forces are somewhere else, and don't want to put boots on the ground. He's got at least half the country, probably more, and he just needs to sit tight, presumably.
Well, yes. I mean, I think the kind of scenario that Vincent is envisioning is one probably where his sons come to him and say, "We got to get out of here. We don't want to go down with you," and basically try to talk him out of it. But all this is very wishful thinking at this point.
And he's got nowhere to go. I mean,
I don't think it's like
we should go to Saudi Arabia.
Saudis
don't love him either.
When Mubarak went, it was more to do with their family interests, to save themselves, their lives, their property, and everything. And I think that one thing is,
I think it was
the thing is, we must not underestimate how these so-called very tough, powerful dictators like Libyan Gaddafi, how cowardly they can be when it reaches them and their own lives and their own property and so on. I can tell you, we can all be shocked because he either has to wait now and there will be a big war, and then he will end up like Saddam Hussein.
The missing piece, the crucial piece, and I think what those who are behind this, to the extent they've thought it through, are counting on, is not even his sons, but it's the military, it's the security forces, and there is a broad or some similarities to Egypt. I mean, one of the reasons Mubarak went is that this national institution, the army, clearly had enough and was not going to support him. Now, it's a little bit more complicated. In Libya, there are far less people. It's all the population is kind of squeezed on this littoral strip. There is this history of tribal division between West and East. But that part of the equation is absolutely the same, that if you can spook and scare enough of the people around him who do have to make this kind of slightly more gray decision, do I go down with Gaddafi or do I save myself? That's what they hope. By the way, I think this discussion shows exactly why Obama took his time.
Because he's hearing
this is
a more elegant version.
Complicated. Exactly. More elegant.
But then there's nothing cowardly about what Gaddafi's doing at the moment. If anything, he's proving that he's very smart and he's well advised. I mean, that ceasefire move was very, very clever because it diffuses the whole foundation of the whole legitimacy of the UN resolution.
But just to broaden this out, Yemen and Bahrain, we talked about, as you suggested.
For a start, there are US allies, and there's no oil in Yemen, so The choice is very straight.
I think the people rising up in Bahrain are not friends of America. First of all, they are Shia, they are related, they are sort of linked to Iran. Iran is encouraging them to
But
rise
friends
up.
of Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
and that's,
Bahrain is scary, I think. You're talking about, it's a very small place, but the Saudis consider it their province, and Iran wants it to be theirs.
Oh, yeah.
So that is immediately a geopolitical issue. It's not just as much as domestic politics.
And within the Gulf Cooperation Council says that people are saying it's Iranian mischief makers who's going.
But having said that, even if this is sort of religious and ethnicities and so on, they could still be genuinely, many of them, looking for democracy. The young people that are
I think there is. Of course.
It is a problem that the international community and the West is ignoring that.
I don't think they're ignoring it. I think, again,
have
they
anything
don't
to
quite
do
know
with
what
that
to do.
situation because they may not be what we want.
You're saying they're not ignoring it, they just don't know what to do.
I don't think they quite know what to do with places like Bahrain. And I think to a certain extent you're right. It depends on whether they're, quote, friends or not. For instance, there were rumblings in the last few weeks or the last few days, rather, of demonstrations and people possibly being killed in Syria.
That's more of that today, actually. We've had more of that.
Because regime change in Syria, I think, would be an easier thing for the West to contemplate than regime change in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and not because one is more democratic or less democratic than the other, but this old kind of sense of do you need a stable kind of geopolitical set of players?
What I want really of the world, the United Nations, because all this seems to be muddled up, chaotic and so on, is for them to have a standard. Do we want democracy in these countries, in Africa, for example? Rather than just doing ad hoc now, Gaddafi can go, this one can go, so let's go on this, just very ad hoc. I think there is something lacking within the international thinking. They need to look at all these governments, Saudi Arabia, whatever. And I always say, my own government, Uganda, these dictators need all to be told, time has come now. But ultimately, ultimately,
Not
it will
stop,
be their own people to rise up.
The matches we keep returning to is when they are told so by their own people. I mean, one of the lessons you could have learned in the past couple of weeks is the tougher you are, the meaner you are with your own people, the more likely you are to hold on to your palaces and your wealth.
Well, again, I think we're slightly misreading what's happening in Libya because, as I said, it's not the Facebook revolution we've seen across the Middle East, and that's one of the mistakes that President Sarkozy made. He said in confidence to one of his aides that he thought Libya was a Facebook revolution. Somebody should have told him that Facebook doesn't work in Libya, and it's not the same situation. And we don't know what's the scale of the rebellion. If it's a majority, if it's a minority, it seems to be a minority, and it's an armed group. So is it legitimate for the West to get rid of someone because a minority of armed people are challenging him for all the legitimate reasons, but they have failed effectively? So is it the job of the West to get rid of Gaddafi?
Well, we will see. Now, I want to move on because the full horror of what's happened to the people of Japan is emerging very slowly. But as we contemplate the humanitarian catastrophe, there are also implications about the future of nuclear power, with governments from Beijing to Berlin talking of reviews and possible policy changes. Will one consequence be to set back the nuclear power industry for years? And if it does, what are the consequences? Have you lived in Japan for a while?
I did for a year.
And did people feel, I've talked to quite a few Japanese people who said that, we've always expected this in a way. We've always kind of been prepared in our head, in our psychology for some catastrophe like this.
I think I lived there many years ago, but I think that's true to an extent, and that although I lived there in the mid-'70s, there was still this shadow of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the sense, particularly where nuclear issues was concerned, of a kind of national, ongoing minute of silence. That there was always, these were the islands where this weapon was used, and the whole nuclear issue was not theoretical for Japanese. It is psychologically embedded in Japan. And yet, on the other hand, you have this paradox, because it's a successful advanced economy, like all advanced economies in the world,